Okay, ma'am. Yeah, sure. Okay, good evening to everyone. Sorry, I don't have the webcam in this particular computer, so I have to use this one today. So please bear with me. Anyway, the PowerPoint is there. So this is my second lecture for you guys. And thank you for the feedback for the previous classes. And yeah, this one is like endocrine diseases. I'm going to take this in two parts. So first part, mainly I'm going to uh, talk about thyroid and the parathyroid. So the remaining endocrine organs I will deal in the subsequent class. And here actually this is from your university website where it shows that must know things and desirable to know, nice to know. The reason why I am showing all these things is like when you see all these things, then only you will get some motivation to read. Sometimes we may not even know that these are the areas we should concentrate and these are the areas we should study and all. And especially, I also encourage all of you to go through the previous university question papers so that when you read, like before even reading the entire that chapter, if you know that the areas where you should focus more and that will help you to read well, like more deeper in those areas. Okay, that is the reason I'm showing all these things. And diabetes, actually I'm not covering touching upon the diabetes because that itself is a very big topic. So maybe a separate lecture, or I don't know, like if someone else is doing, I may not touch on that area. And these are the areas like I'm going to cover today. Okay, so the endocrine organs, we all know that these are the this picture just shows you that what are the endocrine organs are there. And uh, yeah, okay, what are the general characteristics of hormones? So basically, they have a specific rates and patterns of secretion, like diurnal variation, pulsatile pattern, and cyclical patterns, and the pattern that depends on the level of circulating substrates. So, like that, they have a very specific rates and the pattern. So they also operate within a feedback system, so either positive feedback or negative feedback to maintain an optimal internal environment. They affect only cells with appropriate receptors. Specific cell function is initiated. When it is initiated, they will affect only the cells with an appropriate receptor. These are the very special characteristics of hormones. So they are excreted by kidney and deactivated by the liver or by the other mechanisms. So the few words about the regulation of hormonal secretion. The control of hormonal secretion is known as homeostatic feedback. So it can be either negative feedback or positive feedback. So if you see the negative feedback, generally when the hormone level is too high, the gland is shut down, and the hormone level is too low, then the hand gland is stimulated. Okay, so the negative feedback only reverses the direction of change back to physiologic normal. So positive feedback augments the direction of change. If hormone levels are high, the gland is stimulated. The hormone levels are too low, the gland is shut down and even further. Okay. So most endocrine diseases are centered around either too much or too little. The too much is known as hypersecretion from glandular hyperplasia or any tumor that can cause hypersecretion. Too little is any hyposecretion or any glandular atrophy or any other carcinoma which destroys the gland, that can also cause hyposecretion. Okay, this is the basic fundamental fact about the hormonal regulation. Okay, so coming to the thyroid diseases, we all know that development of thyroid is evagination of pharyngeal tissue into the neck, and abnormal descent can cause lingual thyroid and subarachnoid thyroid location and substernal thyroid also sometimes. Okay, so the weight, the normal average weight is 15 to 20 grams. So basically, they are these glands are responsive to stress. Okay, here you can see the thyroid gland here, right lobe, left lobe, and isthmus. Generally, they are you may not see them grossly like this, but they are like multiple lobules composed of many follicles inside the lobules. Okay, these are the small lobules. Okay, multiple lobules. The yellow one is the parathyroid. Okay, this is the normal thyroid look, and here you can see that multinodularity you can see. Just want to compare with the abnormal one. This is the normal one. Okay, right lobe, left lobe, and the isthmus is the one thin that thyroid tissue which connects both the lobes. Okay, And here you can see basically this thyroid is made up of multiple acini or follicles. Okay, these are the follicles. Basically these are the follicles, multiple follicles. So on the each spherical follicle is surrounded by a single layer of cells. They are filled with colloid. Okay, a single layer of these are the thyroid follicular epithelial cell. Basically each follicle is a spherical shape basically. Okay, whenever we see a histological section we will see them as a circular thing structure only, but basically they are spherical structures. Okay, sometimes when you do the FNAC you will get this kind of spherical structures intact. Sometimes, most of the time when we are smearing it, it will destroy that spherical shape, but sometimes rarely we get to see this spherical shape. Okay, so the inside only we will have the colloid material. The colloid materials are the thyroglobulins basically. Okay, thyroglobulin is stored in the colloid of follicles. Okay, here only the thyroglobulin is stored. Okay, the lining epithelium is generally they are flat. When they are inactive they are flat epithelial cells. Okay, and when they are active they become larger and the cytoplasm becomes like the follicle becomes smaller, and the cell, each cell will become larger. Okay, so again you can see this is the, again the thyroid structure, the gross structure is a formalin fixed one, and you can see the multiple follicles here with varying sizes of follicles with colloid. That eosinophilic material is the colloid. Okay, here also you can see this is the colloid, here this is the colloid, and apart from the thyroid, this follicular epithelial cells, we have parafollicular C cells as well. Okay, this is the one which secretes the calcitonin. Okay, this is so important because medullary thyroid carcinoma arises from this parafollicular C cells. Okay, that only secretes the calcitonin. Okay, there are three hormones we have generally, like thyroxine T4, that is more abundant than T3, but less potent. But T3 is the more potent than the T4 and calcitonin. These are the three hormones secreted by thyroid gland. Okay, this one is the cytology of the normal thyroid follicular epithelial cells. Okay, basically they are you can see them like this is a FNAC slide, so that's why it is not in a shape of any spherical or any circular shape. This is how we get in the cytology smear. Okay, these are the follicular epithelial cells. They are round to oval shaped, and slight anisokaryosis can be seen in a normal thyroid like in the smear, and you can see them like cytoplasms are having some blebs. Okay, some, they are known as fire flares. Basically they are mainly seen, now you may not see them in all the smears. Basically they are mainly seen in a condition where that hyperthyroid activity is there. Okay, hyperthyroidism, thyrotoxicosis, those conditions especially you will see them because they are the that shows that the hypersecretory activity. Okay, they are known as fire flares. In normal condition also sometimes you can see them in a very minimal quantity. Okay, this is a the chromatin, if you notice, they are all very hyperchromatic, dense and hyperchromatic. You can't make out any chromatin structure or any any nuclear features you cannot make out. Okay, this is a normal one. Okay, so hypothalamus pituitary thyroid axis, you all must be aware of this, and because this is how that the entire axis they function. From the hypothalamus, this pituitary that receives the signal that thyroid releasing thyrotropin releasing hormone, the in turn that releases the thyroid stimulating hormone, and the thyroid stimulating secretory hormone through the receptors that goes into the thyroid, and through that the thyroglobulin is secreted, like the thyroid transcription factor. So many are involved in that pathway. So that's how when there is excess amount, it like by feedback they inhibit the pituitary. In turn that tells the hypothalamus to stop releasing thyrotropin releasing hormone. So that's how the homeostasis is maintained. Okay, so one of the most important functions of the thyroid hormone is its critical role in brain development in the fetus and the neonate. Okay, so that is the reason, like if at all pregnant lady, if she develops hypothyroidism at the fetus level, like the baby and the baby is at the fetus level, the hypothyroidism is manifesting during that time, then that will severely affect the brain development of the baby. Okay, but if at all she develops hypothyroidism in a later pregnancy, pregnancy, it will not affect brain development. Okay, that's the main important thing, because the thyroid, that hormones are very important for brain development. Maternal thyroid hormone is very important for the brain development. The function of the thyroid gland can be initiated by a variety of, inhibited by the variety of chemical agents. They are collectively known as goitrogens. There are some agents, maybe drugs and maybe some food items, and they can all can inhibit the function of the thyroid gland. They are all known as goitrogens. Okay, I'm sure you all aware of those items, what all can cause. Okay, coming to thyroiditis. Thyroiditis can be divided into acute thyroiditis, autoimmune thyroiditis, or Hashimoto thyroiditis, granulomatous thyroiditis, or decurvens thyroiditis, and lymphocytic thyroiditis. Okay, so basically the acute thyroiditis is basically caused by either it could be bacterial or fungal. Okay, bacterial like the Staph aureus and Streptococcus and the Streptococcus pneumoniae, they all can cause acute thyroiditis, and fungus can be like acute chronic or some granulomatous inflammation they can also cause. So thyroid is secondarily involved by the inflammatory process elsewhere in the neck. That also can happen. It can be a generalized septic. The overall patient may be having a sepsis. That part of that septic process, the thyroid also getting affected, or it can be spread from the local area. Okay, from the larynx or like from the throat, it can involve the adjacent areas. Like that, it can affect thyroid as well. Okay, either it can be localized or it can be a systemic process. So basically the all the features of like clinical features, like all the acute conditions, like they can have fever, sore throat, dysphagia, neck pain, all can happen. And basically in case of acute thyroiditis, the size can be normal or mildly enlarged, and predominantly you will have neutrophilic infiltration. Any acute inflammation will have like that, and necrosis and microabscess formation also can be seen here. Coming to the subacute granulomatous or decurvent thyroiditis, it caused by viral infection basically. Okay, influenza, adenovirus, echovirus, Coxsackie virus, mumps, all can cause subacute granulomatous thyroiditis. Some cases have been associated with antiviral therapy. So because of the interferon release, they also can cause this such kind of reaction. So some individuals may have a genetic predisposition as well. So in the early stage, you may have some follicular damage, loss of epithelium and colloid, neutrophils, microabscess formation can be seen. And in a subacute, the chronic period, you can have granuloma around the colloid. Basically, they are all self-limiting. 5 to 6 months, it will subside by itself, and sometimes you may have some exacerbations as well. Okay, differential is the palpation granuloma. Okay, palpation granuloma is how generally we get to see that very commonly in our government setup. Okay, when we palpate, start seeing some interesting case of thyroid. So as we start seeing, everybody will palpate the patient. Okay, by palpating like that, it can even cause a granuloma. Okay, that is only called palpation granuloma. And also it will affect young to middle-aged adults, and patient may have a low-grade fever, and sorry for the spelling mistake, and myalgia, neck pain, and commonly they present with hypothyroidism. After weeks or months, patient may go into euthyroid phase. Okay, spontaneous return to euthyroidism occurs within 6 to 12 months basically. Okay, so some people like 2 to 15% of the people may have a persistent hypothyroidism because of this. Okay, here you can see that the entire thyroid normal thyroid morphology is not seen here. Only one normal follicle we can make out here with the colloid, and here you can see a granuloma formation with the multinucleated, that Langerhans giant cells and lymphocytic infiltrate granuloma formation. Okay, this is only decurvens granulomatous. Coming to Hashimoto thyroiditis, and by definition, basically they are chronic lymphocytic autohypothyroiditis. Okay, uh, there is another condition called chronic lymphocytic thyroiditis without autoimmune etiology. That is different. Okay, this condition is because of the autoimmune etiology, we have chronic lymphocytic thyroiditis. So basically, in 1912, Hikaru Hashimoto, he was the one who first described 4 cases of Hashimoto thyroiditis. Okay, it predominantly affects women, 30 to 50 years of old, and patient may have a mild diffuse thyroid enlargement, and actually in the initial period patient will have hyperthyroidism because of the destruction of the follicles and release of those hormones and all. But basically in a very chronic condition, generally speaking, Hashimoto thyroiditis will have hypothyroidism, mild hypothyroidism will be seen, and some individuals have genetic predisposition as well. So basically, in here in the Hashimoto thyroiditis, these are the components we generally get to see, like the Huttal cell or oncocytic proliferation will happen because of the injury to the follicles. This is a reaction towards the injury. These cells will become like the mitochondria will increase in the cytoplasm, and they will become this. They will have the Huttal cell metaplasia. Okay, they are the abundant granular cytoplasm. They also found in the thyroid injuries sometimes, and plasma cells also we will see, and lymphocytes and the germinal center formation all can be seen in the thyroid. Okay, in Hashimoto thyroiditis. So these are the mechanism involved in the cell injury basically, and it can be like due to sensitized CD4 T cells, cytokine mediated, or it can be CD8 positive cytotoxic T cell mediated cell death, or it can be presence of thyroid antibody dependent cell mediated cytotoxicity. All three mechanism involves in the T cell sensitization to the thyroid antigens. Okay, it can have a genetic predisposition, especially association with HLA DR3 and DR5. This is an inflammatory process sometimes extend to perithyroid tissue as well. Okay, so it can cause fibrosis, it can be delicate or severe, and there are basically Hashimoto thyroid as such, it doesn't have a pre-malignant potential. Okay, and uh, it increases the risk of primary thyroid lymphoma, especially marginal zone lymphoma, because of lot of lymphocytes are there. So in a long standing condition, that can transform into lymphoma. Okay, so this is the gross picture of the Hashimoto thyroiditis. Generally, it will have a very diffuse enlargement of the thyroid. Okay, diffuse enlargement of the thyroid. Especially when you see the cut section, it will look like a either salivary gland or it's a lymph node. That kind of appearance will be there. Okay, and in the morphology, if you see, these are the cells which are like this large nuclei, and with abundant this eosinophilic cytoplasm. These are the Huttal cells. This is the lymphocyte, and this is the germinal center, and basically this lymphocyte will infiltrate into the Huttal cells. Okay, here you can make out this Huttal cell metaplasia, this area, and this is the germinal center and the follicle formation, and these lymphocytes, they all infiltrate into the Huttal cells. Okay, this is the picture of Hashimoto thyroiditis. Okay, so chronic lymphocytic thyroiditis, this is a different from the this is basically is a painless thyroiditis, and HLA DR3 and 5 can be associated. Women in postpartum period, they may have like uh, vulnerable to develop this, and basically there is no viral etiology associated with that, and hypothyroidism can persist for 2 to 4 months. Okay, so whatever the lymphocyte we see, they are all polyclonal basically. So sometimes when we see the dense lymphocytic infiltrate, we may think that it could be a lymphoma, but if you see the clonality, the lymphocytes are polyclonal. Okay, and this is the picture of lymphocytic thyroiditis. A lot of lymphocytes are there. Okay, Riedel's thyroiditis or invasive fibrous thyroiditis. So basically, they affect adult and elderly patients, predominantly women. Chronic thyroiditis with marked fibrosis and focal lymphocytic infiltration can be seen, and you can see occasional oncocytic cells as well, like the Huttal cells. And the fibrosis of glands, and beyond the thyroid gland, the fibrosis may extend. Okay, that's why in a riddle thyroiditis you will have a stony hardness. Okay, and it will have the adherence to the cervical organs. That will be the complication that may compress or affect the adjacent organs. Okay, the vessels. Okay, this is the dense collagen fibrosis you can make out here, and the hardly we could ever see normal thyroid parenchyma here. Lot of lymphocytic infiltrate is also there. Okay, coming to the colloid nodular goiter. So basically, any enlarged thyroid gland, we call them as a goiter. Okay, it can be euthyroid, it can be hyperthyroid, it can be hypothyroid. Okay, and basically it can be endemic, sporadic, and endemic area is the one that where generally the iodine deficiency areas like the Himalayan belt and all there and all, you will have the endemic goiter, we say. Like most of the time the people are prone to develop, so you will see them people having goiter almost is very normal for them. Okay, so in recent days, because of the so many schemes and the iodine replacement therapy and all, people this kind of things have come under control now. Okay, so this goiter can be diffuse enlargement, or it can present as a simple nodules or single nodule, or it can be multinodular. Okay, there are multifactorial causes are there. Basically, when you talk about nodule, means they are nodule with a incomplete capsule. Okay, if they have a complete capsule, we'll call them as adenoma. Okay, that's why I just highlighted this area. Nodules are basically they're nodule with an incomplete capsule. Okay, they can have fibrosis, degeneration. These are all the secondary changes like a degeneration, fibrosis, inflammation, cystic degeneration, hemorrhage, fibrosis, and big follicles, and plus colloid. And they can have like a different size. Because of that, they can even cause mass effect. Okay, so this is just a picture it shows. I'll show the some more of pictures. Here you can make out the gross here, like multiple nodules. Okay, you can see cystic and solid nodules, and cut section shows multiple nodules here, and areas of hemorrhage and cystic for degeneration. All can be seen in the case of nodular hyperplasia. Okay, you can see the varying sizes of the thyroid follicles with abundant colloid inside the follicles. Okay, and here you can see one follicle which is very much dilated, enlarged, and you can see the in a cystic, almost like the cystically enlarged this follicle with lot of colloid, and in a one pole you may have a normal these follicles here. This is only known as Sanderson-Polsters. Okay, you can see here the more of these colloid filled areas, and can see the hemorrhage, recent and old hemorrhage. You can see cystic degeneration. Some areas you may even have a calcification. Okay, if you see a cystically dilated follicle, will have more of this cyst macrophages. Okay, so this is a huge multinodular. Sometimes you may have a pseudo papillary areas. Okay, sometimes it will confuse you for papillary carcinoma. If you notice the lining epithelium, follicular epithelium, they're all like small and hyperchromatic nuclei. They're not showing any nuclear features of papillary thyroid carcinoma. Okay, coming to hyperthyroidism, it can be primary or secondary. And hypothyroidism, basically there are like disorders associated with hypothyroidism are commonly due to diffuse toxic hyperplasia, Graves' disease. This is the most common cause. 85% of them associated with this Graves' disease, hypothyroidism, and toxic multinodular goiter, that is composed of 15%, and toxic adenoma. Okay, basically this multinodular goiter and adenoma all like euthyroid condition. Sometimes they also have toxic features. Okay, that only will present as a hypothyroidism. The uncommon causes like acute or subacute thyroiditis can also cause hypothyroidism, maybe in the early stage, and hyperfunctioning thyroid carcinoma, rarely they also can cause hypothyroidism. Okay, there are some disorders they are associated with hypothyroidism, like uncommon conditions like choriocarcinoma and TSS secreting pituitary adenoma, neonatal thyrotoxicosis associated with the maternal Graves' disease, struma ovary, and iodide-induced hypothyroidism. All these rare conditions also can cause hyperthyroidism. Okay, and coming to the Graves' disease, basically it is a autoimmune disease, and it will have generalized lymphoid hyperplasia throughout the thyroid, and it can affect so many systems basically. Okay, it can cause exophthalmos, and it can cause thyroid enlargement itself as such, and it can cause sweating, and in cardiac CVS they can cause arrhythmia and tachycardia. In GI they can cause nausea, diarrhea, and for women they can cause even oligomenorrhea, and some they will have tremors, muscle weakness, all like in a systemic, like the whole entire all the almost all the systems are affected by this hypothyroidism. Okay, that's how they are all the different manifestations are there. Okay, basically the patient will have a exophthalmos, and that is due to chronic inflammation and edema of the extraocular muscles. Over the time they may even cause atrophy and fibrosis of the muscle, that only causes exophthalmos. And also it can cause peritibial edema, and that is because of the accumulation of hydrophilic glycosaminoglycans. Okay, so excessive levels of thyroid hormone result in an increase in the basal metabolic rate. Basically, that is the overall effect is that is the one. And cardiac manifestations are among the earliest and most consistent feature of hypothyroidism. Okay, and ocular changes often call attention to hypothyroidism. And thyroid storm is used to designate the abrupt onset of severe hypothyroidism. Okay, that's a medical emergency. That's a medical emergency. Okay, thyroid storm that can be due to any surgery or any infection, or this kind of any manipulation, they can cause thyroid storm. Okay, and another condition called apathetic hypothyroidism. Basically this is in an elderly patient it will happen because you may not have the symptoms manifested very well, but it is like a very subclinical hyperthyroidism. Basically when only when you do the routine investigations, or sometimes patient may have weight loss or something like the unknown reason. So when you investigate the patient, you may find that the patient must be having hypothyroidism. Okay, that is called apathetic hypothyroidism. Hypothyroidism, sorry. So the diagnosis of hypothyroidism, you can, if you measure the TSH level, will be very low, and free T4 is the most useful screening test for thyrotoxicosis. Okay, TSH level can be normal or increase in secondary thyrotoxicosis. In some patients, increased T3, but the T4 levels may be normal or decreased. Okay, and measurement of radioactive iodine uptake is a direct indication of activity inside the gland. Okay, if you do the TSH level, how to approach, you can just see here. TSH level you are doing, if it is increased, then you do the T4 level. The T4 level is also increased, TSH is also increased. That may be because of secondary hypothyroidism. Okay, and you can see that may be due to like TSH secreting pituitary adenomas or conditions like that. Sometimes it will be normal with increased TSH. Okay, that can be subclinical hypothyroidism. And sometimes increased TSH but decreased T4 level, that is only primary hypothyroidism. Conditions like autoimmune thyroiditis, you will have like that. So when the TSH levels are normal, but you have T4 levels are increased, that may be seen in secondary hyperthyroidism. And the TSH levels are normal, but T4 levels are decreased, that can be seen in secondary hypothyroidism. Okay, when you have a decreased TSH levels and increased T4 level, that is the primary hyperthyroidism. Decreased TSH and decreased T4, that is seen in secondary clinical hypothyroidism. Okay, this is just to show you the radioiodide uptake. Okay, this is the normal uptake. This is seen in Graves' disease, and in case of toxic multinodular goiter, whichever the nodule has the high uptake, they will show like this. Okay, toxic adenoma. Adenoma is like a single nodule, actually, basically a single nodule, fully encapsulated. Okay, if you see them in the uptake, it will show highlight only that particular area. Okay, in Graves' disease, you can have this because of the hyperactivity, all the cells will have this kind of abundant cytoplasm, and here the colloid with these vacuolations and all will be seen because of the hyperactivity. Okay, here also you can see the multiple layers of this kind of cytoplasmic these areas. Okay, and in case of very dilated area where you see them a normal thyroid in a one pole, that is only known as Sanderson Polsters. Okay, sometimes you will have pseudopapillary hyperplasia of the thyroid gland. Coming to hypothyroidism, and hypothyroidism basically it can be primary or secondary, and if you see the primary reason, it can be developmental, like because of the thyroid dysgenesis, because of these mutations in the backside, FOXC1, TSH receptor, all can cause developmental thyroid dysgenesis. And thyroid hormone resistance syndrome, okay, that also can cause primary hypothyroidism. And sometimes in case of post ablative, okay, like post surgery, it can you can have. And sometimes when you give a radio iodine therapy, that also can cause hypothyroidism. And external irradiation to some other structure also can, if that affects the thyroid, that also can cause hypothyroidism. Autoimmune hypothyroidism, Hashimoto thyroiditis, iodine deficiency, some drugs, they all can cause and they all can cause hypothyroidism. Okay, secondary causes like a pituitary failure or hypothalamic failure all can cause hypothyroidism. Basically, any structural or functional derangement of the gland can cause hypothyroidism. And overt hypothyroidism is almost like 0.3%, but there are subclinical hypothyroidism can be seen in more than 4%. Okay, overall. And the female, 10 times they are more common in female than the male. And worldwide, the congenital hypothyroidism is the most often the result of endemic iodine deficiency in the diet. And autoimmune hypothyroidism is the most common cause of hypothyroidism in iodine sufficient areas of the world. Okay, these are the facts you should remember. And they more often, like they these areas are like very much asked in the PG entrance. Okay, that's why they're all very important. Actually, when you are studying for the routine thing, you may not read most of these areas very well. But when I did the PG preparation, that time I understood that these are the most means the high yield area where these small points, they again repeatedly they will ask. Classic clinical manifestations of hypothyroidism include cretinism and myxedema or Gull's disease. Gull disease is because the person, I think the William Gull, he was the one who described it first. Okay, so the cretinism and myxedema are the two manifestations. Basically, the cretinism include impaired development of skeletal system and central nervous system manifested by severe mental retardation, short stature, coarse facial features, all those things can be seen. Cretinism is basically infancy and childhood disease. Myxedema is older children and the adults. Okay, and this is characterized by myxedema is characterized by slowing of physical and mental activity. Okay, measurement of the serum TSH level is the most sensitive screening test for this disorder. Okay, coming to thyroid adenoma or follicular adenoma, basically adenomas are having complete fibrous capsule will be there. Okay, they have a different histology inside and outside of the capsular lesion, because the whatever there is the thyroid tissue inside the adenoma, it's a clonal population that will be different from the adjacent normal thyroid parenchyma. Okay, these adenomas can have a compression of the thyroid parenchyma surrounding them, and it can have so many patterns like a fetal or microfollicular pattern, solid pattern, follicular pattern, micro or macro follicle can be seen, and Huthle cell adenoma. If you have the entire adenoma is composed of Huthle cells, it is known as Huthle cell adenoma or oncocytic adenoma. And papillary adenoma, that's a very rare terminology we use. Generally, whenever you see a papillary in a adenomatous area, usually you should suspect carcinoma. Okay, you should look for nuclear features. And atypical adenoma, sometimes it may have some spindle cell areas. Okay, this is the gross structure where you can see the gray-white, well circumscribed nodule here, and which is entirely surrounded by a capsule. And this is the adjacent normal thyroid. Okay, this is the follicular adenoma. Okay, here also we can see this is the adenoma inside. You see the follicles back to back, they are arranged, and they look different from the adjacent areas, and they are surrounded by this thick fibrous capsule. Okay, this is a panoramic view, like where you, sorry, this is the whole mount view where you can see the entire nodule is different from the surrounding areas. Okay, here you can see the adjacent thyroid looks normal, and but the thyroid follicles inside the adenoma, they look totally different from the adjacent thyroid. Okay, they're all small and arranged back to back. Basically, they're all microfollicles. Here also you can see microfollicular type, and the normal thyroid surrounding area. This is the capsule here. Hurthle cell tumor, basically they will have predominantly these Hurthle cells. Okay, you can see the nucleus having visible nucleoli, and the cytoplasm is abundant granular eosinophilic cytoplasm. This is the typical Hurthle cell. Okay, coming to the malignant tumors of thyroid gland, basically papillary thyroid carcinoma is the most common among all of them, followed by follicular carcinoma, medullary thyroid carcinoma, and polydifferential carcinoma, anaplastic or undifferentiated carcinoma. But here, just to mention about the follicular carcinoma, nowadays this percentage is like very, very low. Actually, it's not even 20 to 25%, but it is even very less commoner than the medullary carcinoma nowadays. That's what in our routine practice we are seeing, because the earlier whatever the follicular carcinoma diagnosed, later they're all like described as follicular variant of papillary thyroid carcinoma. As such, the pure form of follicular carcinoma is very rare nowadays. Okay, and other rare tumors like squamous cell carcinoma, lymphomas, sarcomas, metastatic tumors can occur. Coming to papillary thyroid carcinoma, basically they develop in the cases like who received previous radiation in the head and neck region, and they will have an indolent growing pattern. And basically, overall, they have excellent prognosis. They can be solitary or multiple, and their first metastasis to the regional lymph nodes can be seen. And papillary carcinoma has so many variants. The most common is the classic type or conventional type, followed by follicular variant of papillary carcinoma, and other variants are there. I will show them later. And 10 to 30% they have a regional lymph node metastasis at the time of diagnosis. Basically, in older people, the papillary thyroid carcinoma, even though they have a good prognosis overall, but in older people they behave more aggressively. For example, this tall cell variant, Hobnail variant, they are all especially occur in older people. They have a very aggressive course. Okay, and basically they have a true papillae. They should have a definition wise, they should have a true papillae. True papillae is papillae which is you should have a fibrovascular core and surrounded by the papillary finger like projection lined by this atypical follicular epithelial cells. Okay, it can be unilateral or bilateral, and they can have a calcification. The typical one, the very circular laminations, they are known as Samoma bodies. Okay, otherwise the nuclear features are they should have a clear nuclei or ground glass nuclei, and nuclear grooves which can be seen, and nuclear pseudo inclusions. I'll tell why it is pseudo inclusion, and overlapping of the nuclei will be seen. Okay, in case of follicular variant of papillary carcinoma, generally you should not see a papillae there. Okay, and you will see them only follicular pattern will be there, but they will have all the nuclear features of papillary thyroid carcinoma. That's why they are known as follicular variant of papillary carcinoma. Okay, all the variants they have a good prognosis except for tall cell and hobnail and columnar cell solid variant. They all have a relatively poor prognosis. Distant metastasis can happen to bone, lung, and other areas, and the 10-year survival overall is 98%. So these are the almost like 15 variants are there for papillary thyroid carcinoma. Okay, so anyway, a few of them maybe you should at least mention, because recently I corrected the MBBS paper. There I found, I was surprised to see like many of the MBBS students, they know the not all the 15 types of variants, but at least they know this classic variant and follicular variant and tall cell variant, and this kind of like so oncocytic variant. This and all, they some of them mentioned, most of them they mentioned. I was really surprised to see, because these are all like we consider as a PG level question, but these people have mentioned that. So I was really very impressed to see. And all the nuclear features were nicely drawn, and nuclear features were very well delineated in the papers actually. So here you can see the thyroid with these gray white areas. They are the tumor area. Okay, this is a multifocal tumor basically, and here you can see the even some of them can show you this kind of papillary excrescence grossly. Okay, but in case of follicular variant or any other solid variant, you may not see this kind of papillary excrescence. They will just look like this solid gray white areas. Okay, and again I just want to show you the normal, this is the normal cytology, and this is the papillary thyroid carcinoma where you can make out these nucleus and all, they are very hyperchromatic and they have a lot of cytoplasm, but here the cytoplasm is less, and these cells, if you see them, you can see them like a ground glass appearance, like almost like clearing of the nuclei. Okay, and clearing of the nuclei, and you can see the grooves of the nuclear grooves. Okay, can you see that coffee bean appearance? Okay, nuclear grooves and one nuclei overlapping over the other nuclei, and these are the and irregular nuclear membrane. So all these are the features of papillary thyroid carcinoma. Okay, and here also you can make out some of them are having this inclusion, the intranuclear inclusion. The inclusion will be the same color of the cytoplasm, because this is basically they are known as pseudo inclusion. They are not the real inclusion, true inclusions, because of the clearing of the nuclei and transparency of the nuclei. This cytoplasm is seen through the nucleus. That only gives the appearance of inclusion. Okay, that's why we call them as intranuclear pseudo inclusions. Okay, this is a normal follicular epithelial cells. Here, this is the PTC cell where you can see the groove and you can see the overlapping and you can see this kind of inclusions. Okay, and here you can make out this clear nuclear clearing. Actually, the nuclear clearing is very much appreciated in the formalin fixed biopsy tissues, because the formalin actually they clear the chromatin, actually the fixation artifact basically. So post fixation the clearing will be very much very well seen. Okay, they are otherwise known as orphan Annie nuclei. Orphan Annie nuclei, that is because there is a novel, I think the old novel, where that the orphan Annie, who is the character, that character, she is everywhere she has shown to have eyes without the pupil. Okay, that's only the circular thing. That's all. That's how the eyes are drawn actually. So they this PTC nuclei also look like the same. That's why they are known as orphan Annie nuclei or ground glass nuclei. Okay, so here you can see the multiple papillae with the fibrovascular core with samoma bodies. You can see here these samoma bodies. You can make out here the very circular laminations of the calcified bodies. Okay, they are the samoma bodies. There are very characteristics of PTC. Okay, again you can make out all these cells. Follicular variant, where you will see the all the nuclear features will be there, but all of them are in a follicular pattern. We won't see any papillary pattern here. Okay, and this is the lymph node with the metastasis. Coming to follicular carcinoma, they are basically more aggressive than papillary carcinoma. Basically occurs in older patients, and absence you won't see any of the papillae or any of the nuclear features of papillary thyroid carcinoma. You won't see samoma bodies and you won't see papillae, and basically they can be micro-invasive or largely invasive. You have to demonstrate vascular and capsular invasion, then only we can call them as a follicular carcinoma. Otherwise you will just call them as follicular adenoma. Okay, so invasion into the next structures also happens. Histologically they can have a macrofollicular or microfollicular pattern, or it can have a solid tumor pattern. Okay, and this is the gross picture where you can see the solid area and gray white tumor, very large and very invasive borders. Okay, here you can make out the, this is the vessel and you can see the tumor infiltrating the vessel. Okay, vascular invasion, and this is the capsula, this is again the vascular invasion, and here you can make out the capsular invasion. Okay, this is the surrounding capsule. The capsule is infiltrated by these tumor cells. Okay, again you can make out here the capsule is infiltrated by these tumor cells. Coming to the poorly differentiated thyroid carcinoma or PDTC, they are aggressive malignant tumor of follicular cell origin basically that is characterized by partial loss of thyroid differentiation. Okay, the another term frequently used is the insular carcinoma because of the pattern they have. It is known as insular carcinoma or poorly differentiated thyroid carcinoma. They have almost 70% mortality. Okay, in a 5 years in a aggressive tumors. Microscopically, they can have a solid or trabecular or insular pattern, and they lack well-developed nuclear features of papillary thyroid carcinoma. And one of the following should be there, like convoluted nuclei and tumor necrosis, or 3 or more mitosis per eye power field. Okay, uh, 3 or more mitosis per 10 eye power field, basically. Okay, all the features should be there for poorly differentiated thyroid carcinoma. Okay, the gross structure shows very solid areas with areas of hemorrhage and necrosis can be seen. Okay, and this is the insular pattern. Okay, this is the insular pattern. Okay, they are like very nesting, and this that's why they are known as insular carcinoma. Sometimes they are very solid. Okay, anaplastic or undifferentiated carcinoma. Basically, they are highly aggressive malignant thyroid tumor composed of undifferentiated cells that demonstrate immunohistochemical and ultracellular features of epithelial differentiation. Basically, they are derived from follicular epithelial cells, but they devoid of morphologic and immunophenotypic markers of thyroid origin. Like basically, TTF1 is the immunohistochemistry marker. Generally, we do for any thyroid origin. Okay, but it will be negative in case of anaplastic carcinoma. In those cases, we have to do PAX8. Okay, that can stain the thyroid derivatives even when they are undifferentiated. Okay, it can have a spindle cell or giant cell variant, and sarcomatoid carcinoma, pleomorphic carcinoma, metaplastic carcinoma, carcinoma. These are the other synonyms used for anaplastic carcinoma in the earlier days. Okay, because they have different morphology. Okay, they can present like a spindle cell tumor like that. Okay. Coming to medullary thyroid carcinoma, they are less frequent comparing to others, and they are basically they are endocrine, neuroendocrine tumor because they arise from the parafollicular C cells. Okay, and so if you do the calcitonin serum marker, it will be elevated, and also if you do the immunohistochemistry over the tumor cells, the calcitonin will be nicely staining. Okay, 70 to 80% of them are sporadic. 15 to 30% of them can be familial or hereditary. Okay, they are associated with the men syndromes. Okay, 2A and 2B. Okay, in the stroma you may have amyloid deposition as well. Okay, so that is men 2A and 2B, and they also secrete ACTS, serotonin, and other hormones, and they are basically known as white tumor. Asymmetric and hard hemorrhages, areas of hemorrhage can be seen, and they are known for early lymph node involvement. Basically, before even detecting the thyroid tumor, you may have lymph node metastasis, especially in the cases associated with the syndromes like Men syndrome. They can have early lymph node involvement. Okay, histologically they can have solidness and glands like follicles, spindle cell, trabecular pattern, papillary pattern, anaplastic type. They also have different variants like papillary thyroid carcinoma. Basically their metastasis is either hematogenous or lymphomatous. Okay, but papillary thyroid carcinoma mainly lymphomatous. Okay, that also can hematogenous, but predominantly they are lymphomatous. Follicular carcinoma, that is hematogenous. These are all MCQ questions actually. Okay, follicular carcinoma hematogenous, but in medullary carcinoma it can be both hematogenous as well as lymphomatous. Okay, 5-year survival is 50% only. So this is a solid tumor, you can see not much difference from the other tumors. And you can have this kind of cells, spindle type cells, or it can come like a nesting type cells, this kind of nest like organoid pattern. Okay, it can also come like that. This is the amyloid material seen in the stroma. If you do the Congo red stain, that will highlight all the amyloid material, orangeophilic areas. They are the amyloid material. Coming to a few of the FNAC pictures, this is the which I mentioned, the spherical follicle. Okay, normal follicle. Okay, and these are the Hurthle cells. they will have abundant cytoplasm and variation in the nucleus, and visible nucleoli is sometimes seen. Okay, the cytoplasm will have this kind of abundant granular cytoplasm. Okay, in case of papillary thyroid carcinoma, FNAC will have this kind of papilloid structures. Okay, and it can have all the papillary structure. If you see the high power, you can see all those ground glass appearance, grooves, intranuclear inclusions, all can be seen. Okay, so this is a summum body in a FNAC slide. Coming to parathyroid gland, basically they derive from third and fourth pharyngeal pouches. 90% of the people have 4 glands, and if you are under this 10%, we may not have whether we have 4 glands or not. And location mostly close to the upper and lower poles of the thyroid, and it can be found anywhere along the line of descent of the pharyngeal pouches. Okay, there are 2 types of cells. You have to remember this: chief cells and the oxyphil cells. Okay, secretion of parathyroid is controlled by the level of free calcium in the serum. Okay, so coming to primary hyperthyroidism, commonest cause of asymptomatic hypercalcemia is the primary hyperparathyroidism, and the female are more commonly affected than the male, and the causes may be, it could be adenoma, hyperplasia, or carcinoma. Adenoma is the most common cause, almost 75 to 80% are due to adenoma. So majority of adenomas are sporadic, and 5% familial associated with men 1 and 2A. Okay, and there are genetic abnormalities. I'm not very much going into that. Okay, I don't have time now. I'll quickly just finish this. Okay, PRAD1 and MEN1. You just remember these genes. In these gene mutations, it can be seen in the hyperparathyroidism. So biochemical finding, you will see increased parathormone, increased calcium, decreased phosphate, and increased alkaline phosphatase. Actually, these are all MCQ questions. Okay, what is the status of this parathormone, calcium, phosphate, and alkaline phosphate in different conditions like hyperparathyroidism, in hypoparathyroidism, in case of vitamin D deficiency, all have a big, actually, they're the very repeated questions in the PG entrance. Okay, these are all very commonly asked questions. So just make it very clear about like what all will be elevated, what all will be decreased. Okay, like that. So adenomas, usually they are single, and rarely they are multiple. They are well circumscribed and encapsulated nodule. Basically, the cells, they will have either uniform chief cells or few oxyphil cells can be seen. And generally in a parathyroid, parathyroid, you'll have adipose tissue inside the parenchyma. But in case of adenoma, you will not see adipose tissue. Maybe 1 or 2 areas you may see, but generally adipocytes may not be seen. And here also you will have compressed surrounding normal parathyroid in the seen in the periphery. These are the features of parathyroid adenoma. You can make out here. This is the adenomatous area, and here you can see the compressed normal parathyroid here, and this is well circumscribed lesion. And here you can see a lot of adipocytes. This is a normal parathyroid. Here hardly ever we could see any adipocytes. Okay, these are the features of adenoma. Hyperplasia, whenever you call them as hyperplasia, you need to examine all the 4 glands. Then only you can call them as hyperplasia. Whenever the hyperplasia happens, generally it affects all the 4 glands together. Okay, diagnosis of adenoma versus hyperplasia may be depend on the size of the other gland. Whenever you are calling something as adenoma, you should make sure the other 3 glands are normal. Then only you can call them as adenoma. If they are also enlarged, that is more likely it is a hyperplasia. Okay, that is a dictum. So carcinoma, generally they are larger than the adenoma. They are adherent to surrounding tissue. They can have pleomorphism and mitosis. And the most reliable criteria for malignancy is invasion and metastasis. Okay, these are the 2 features should be there to call it as a carcinoma. Any endocrine gland you take, all of them are like adenoma to carcinoma. Mainly you need to have a invasion into the capsule, and the either capsule, the adjacent structure, or should have a metastasis. These are the criteria to call them as a carcinoma. Okay, so morphologically they can have bone osteotic fibrosa cystica. They can even collection of osteoclasts. They can form a brain tumor, sorry, brown tumors, and chondrocalcinosis or pseudogout may occur. And renal, they can cause renal stones, and they can cause a blood vessel myocardium. All those areas calcifications can happen. So all these are the features in other organs. Okay, 50% of the people are asymptomatic. The patients show increased calcium, increased parathormone levels in the serum. Okay, and the commonest cause of silent hypercalcemia is hyperparathyroidism, basically. Okay, in the majority of the symptomatic hypercalcemia, commonest cause is widespread metastasis to bone. Okay, this, just remember this: painful bones, renal stones, abdominal groans, psychic moans. Okay, maybe all of you can tell this before you sleep, and when you wake up also you can tell this: painful bones, renal stones, and abdominal groans, psychic moans. Okay, after that you may get some stones also. I'm not responsible for that. Okay, secondary hyperparathyroidism. They occur in any condition associated with chronic hypocalcemia, mostly chronic renal failure. Glands are generally hyperplastic, and renal failure can cause decreased phosphate excretion that can eventually increase the serum phosphate level and decrease calcium. That will increase the parathyroid secretion. Okay, that is called secondary hyperparathyroidism. Tertiary is the extreme activity of the parathyroid gland, autonomous function, and or development of adenoma that can cause tertiary hyperparathyroidism. Hypoparathyroidism, basically this is caused due to damage to the gland or its vessels during the thyroid surgery, or idiopathic or autoimmune conditions also can contribute. Pseudo hypoparathyroidism, tissue resistant to parathyroid hormone, can also have this kind of condition. And clinical features, generally patient will have tetany, convulsion, neuromuscular irritability, neuromuscular changes, weakness, and irritability, cardiac arrhythmias, all can happen in hypoparathyroidism. Okay, I'm stopping here, and then the second part we'll see mostly the adrenal, other the remaining adrenal gland, and the other syndromes, men syndrome and all we can see. Thank you so much for your patience, and sorry that I slightly exceeded the time.